Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to talk about all the books that I read in the month of November. I had an amazing reading month in November. I had a lot of 5 stars. Some of these will definitely be favorites of the year. I had a great time. I read the top 10. Well, I read more than the top 10 for the Goodreads Choice Award. So most of the books that I'll be talking about in this video, not most, but at least half of the books that I talk about I have read for that video, so I'll leave that linked for you. It is a very, very long video, but I do go in depth about every single book, and it has timestamps. So if you only want to know about one or a couple of the books, you can definitely check that video out. And of course, I also did a mid-month wrap-up this month. So I will be talking about every single book I read this month, but for the books that I already talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, I'll only tell you the title, the author, and my rating. If you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts, definitely check out that mid-month wrap-up. So let's start with the stats. I read 15 books this month and I DNF'd one. I read 5,614 pages. And I do have to say, I read about 500 pages of pucking around in November, but I will not be counting that. The actual amount of pages is over 6,000, but like I said, I never really count the pages of the books that I haven't finished. Those get added on next month, so next month will be a win for me. I had one DNF, like I said, one 1-star book, 4 3-stars, 3 4-stars, and 7 5-stars. All of the books I read this month were adult. I didn't have any YA or middle grade. I read 9 contemporary romances, 2 sports romances, 1 military romance, 1 paranormal romance, 1 fantasy romance, and 1 memoir. I read 2 novellas and 14 novels. And as far as my goals are concerned, my goal to read books published before 2014, I'm gonna just not talk about that goal anymore because I don't have time. I didn't have time this month and I won't have time next month to really read for that goal. So I guess I did not accomplish that one. And then for my goal of ending up with 30 open series by the end of the year, I'm also not doing too well on that. And that is because of the Goodreads Choice video, because I didn't finish any series this month. I didn't DNF any series, but I did add 6 series this month because of the Goodreads Choice Awards, which means right now I have 48 open series, whereas last month I only had 42 open series. I do have to say, with the Goodreads Choice Awards, I have 2 where I only need to read 1 book to either finish or get caught up on that series. And I have 3 where I would only need to read 2 books to get caught up on that series. I knew this, so I should have been prepared before November I should have just finished more series before November, but whatever. Now let's get on with the reviews. Oh, actually, I also didn't do any rereading this month. Usually I start with my rereads, but I didn't do any this month. So let's start with my DNF. I DNF'd Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. So I actually bought this specifically for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I knew before I started it that it was not really a romance, that a lot of people really didn't love it. And even though a lot of people did read it, I know that, for example, the 5 stars are not that many. But I figured, let's just give it a chance. At that point, I thought that I did have the time to actually finish it. So I started reading it. By the 30-page mark, I was already not enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying the writing style. I wasn't enjoying the fact that she used fake celebrity names interspersed with real politicians. Like, I don't like that. Choose one or the other. Don't combine the two. I don't like that. But I figured let's just give it 30 more pages. And by that point, I didn't enjoy it at all. This was a book that I started after really not enjoying one book, and then the other I was kind of mid about. So let me actually tell you what this is about. This is basically an SNL writer, except in this book it's not called SNL, it has another name. So she writes comedy sketches for this SNL-like show, and they have guest stars that are like SNL celebrities, like actress or actors or singers, stuff like that. And she notices that anytime like this beautiful actress or like there's already been 3 beautiful famous women that have ended up with these writers, whereas the other way around, that never happens, and it will probably never happen until it happens to her. Obviously, there's this very famous singer that comes and they start a relationship, I guess. By the 60-page mark, I wasn't enjoying the writing. I also knew that this only has 3 chapters, which means the chapters are ginormous. I do have to say there are page breaks because you basically follow her every day. And that was just boring to me. Like, I didn't care about this at all. Like, you only followed her. It was single point of view, which I sometimes have issues with actual romances, let alone not romance. And then I flicked through the book and I saw that there was a giant chunk of them just sending emails back and forth, which I also don't like because that means they're not together for a good portion of this book. So yeah, and I didn't really enjoy the main character. I found her whiny and I couldn't relate. So yeah, DNF'd, and I'm very glad about it. I still don't understand how this one made the top 10 in the romance category. Now for my 1-star review, Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. This is about a girl named Fern and a guy named Will. And they met 10 years ago and they had like this whirlwind romance, like this magical day that made them soulmates. Like they had this perfect day together, and then but both of them were in a relationship at the time, so they promised each other that they would meet a year later at her mom's lake. Her mom has this lakeside resort at this lake, but he never shows. And now 9 years have passed, and now he finally shows up after 9 years, and her mother has passed, and apparently he made a deal with her mom last year that he would help her because the resort was failing, stuff like that. And now all those feelings come back, and she finally learns what happened all those years ago. This was a 1-star review. If you want to know, like I said, more of my in-depth thoughts, definitely check out that Goodreads choice video, but I really didn't like this book. First of all, she never convinced me that this day was so magical. Like, I was not convinced at all. Especially, I read a bunch of romance, some of them similar to this one, where you get one chapter in the present and one chapter in the past. And with those other books, like for example, In the Likely Event is sold very similarly, except the chapters in the past span 7 years. It was a lot of telling and not showing because Fern constantly kept saying, oh, we had all these deep conversations. We never saw those. The only thing we saw, the only thing we heard was how hot Will was. She just kept emphasizing his looks. And at the end of the day, I just never knew Will. Like, I didn't know who he was, except that he was hot. I didn't think they had any chemistry together. This was single point of view. And it also really didn't feel like romance. It felt like Fern dealing with her mom's passing and figuring out what she wants to do in life, and not really about her relationship with Will. This man, he was just a flaky person, and I truly don't understand the obsession with him. And I also don't understand why he would love her either. And they kept saying things like, you know me, I know you. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, this was all based on a single day 10 years ago, like when they were in their early 20s, and now they are in their 30s. But that is just writing, because I didn't feel like this author convinced me that these two were soulmates. And I felt like this book could have been a 2 if we focused a little bit more on the resort, like the kooky characters in the resort, and she never really did that either. So therefore, like, I didn't like Fern, I didn't like Will, and the side characters were not interesting at all and not well developed, in my opinion. So I gave it 1 star. And I would not recommend this one. I didn't have any 2 stars, so for my 3 stars, 2 of them I talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, and they were Cupid's Peak by Lee Juco and The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. With The Things We Leave Unfinished, I also did a Rebecca Yarros vlog, reading books by her that were not Fourth Wing. So if you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts on that book, definitely check out that vlog. My other 2 3-star books, no, I had 2 other 3 stars. One of them is King of Pride by Anna Huang. Actually, this you cannot really see, so I'll just put a picture here. I read this obviously for the Goodreads choice video, and Anna Huang, even though I really like her as an author and I have had some beautiful 5 stars from her, she's not a consistent author for me. Like, I can give her books any star rating, really. Like, if you look at the Twisted series, I gave 1 3-star, I gave 1 2-star, I gave 1 3-star, and I gave 2 5-stars. It's not a guarantee that if I pick up her book, it's gonna be 5 stars. And this is actually the first book I read in the Kings of Sin by her. And this one, like I said, was a 3. Series follows like different billionaires and their deadly sin, basically. And this one follows King of Pride, so he's very prideful. You follow Kai, who is this very uptight guy who's really a rule follower, and, you know, he does everything that's proper and stuff like that. And you follow this girl who is just like go with the flow, doesn't really have a plan, and it's just, she says things without thinking about it first. And they actually know each other through mutual friends, but also he's this member of this exclusive club named Valhalla, and she is a waiter there, and they're not supposed to fraternize, but of course they do, and they do fall in love. First of all, I do have to say, I don't really love billionaire romances. The ones that were not 5 stars in her Twisted series were actually the billionaire romance. It was Twisted Love and Twisted Lies. Billionaire romance is not really my thing. I don't mind them if they take place in a different setting, but since this was definitely in the corporate setting and in this like exclusive club, stuff like that, I don't care about that. To be honest, this was a 4-star throughout a lot of this book, and then the third act conflict happened, and I just couldn't give it any more than a 3. I felt like that was very contrived. In this book, I felt like I either don't have a third act conflict because it really didn't need one, but because there was a lot of external conflicts already happening, it didn't need a third act breakup in the traditional sense. Or it should have happened earlier and not at the point where it happened. I just felt like these characters were very forgettable. I don't think I'll think about Kai and... what's her name? Kai and Isabella. I want to say Kai and Miller from Caught Up, but yeah, Kai and Isabella in the future. It was fine to me. I could understand why a lot of people would love it, but to me, this is not my favorite. She does set up other books in the series very well. Like she sets up King of Wrath and King of Sloth very well. So I'm very excited about those 2 books, and I still need to read King of Wrath. I would say with Ana Huang, I do know that like some of my favorites were maybe some people's least favorites. So I do think I cannot confidently say that whether or not you would like it. So I would say just try it, because I know, for example, Twisted Love is a lot of people's favorites. It wasn't mine, and I know some people hated or Twisted Games, and that is one of my favorites. Yeah, I do have to say Ana Huang is an amazing author, and her sex scenes top notch. Even in this book, I was like fanning myself. Very good. So yes, my other 3-star is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I'm very sad about this one because I had very high hopes for this one. I have just been hearing so many good things about it. This is a story about a girl named Clementine, and her aunt recently passed away, and she's looked up to her aunt for a long time. They go traveling together every year, and her aunt is just really her favorite person. So she has been grieving, and her aunt actually let her apartment, but she always told her that there was something special about this apartment, that sometimes it takes you back 7 years in the past, and you can interact with the person that has been living there 7 years ago. And she never really believed her until it happens to her. She goes into her apartment one day and she finds this random guy living there. First she thinks he's a burglar, and then she realizes, wait, this apartment took me back 7 years ago when my aunt was actually traveling with me 7 years ago, and she has subletted this apartment to this guy. And this apartment is very flaky, like it's never consistent when it takes her back. So it takes her back a couple of times, and in those times she falls in love with the man. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Ivan, I don't know. So they fall in love, but then she starts thinking, wait a minute, why has he never looked for me? Like, where has he been all this time? Eventually she does meet him in real life, and he is a very different man from the man he was 7 years ago. She has to kind of grapple with that. This one I gave 3 stars, mainly because once again, I didn't really feel like this was a romance. It was once again, single point of view, plus it was once again very focused on her. It was focused on what she wanted to do in life, about her grief, and he was just a vehicle getting her to realizing what her actual dreams were, it felt like. Also, I felt like if this was written from his point of view, at least, like you would have gotten the pining, you would have gotten the years spent wanting her, whereas with her, like she met him like a month ago and now she's meeting him again. Like it just, the time, the yearning, the aching, it didn't come across because it wasn't that way for her. I did feel like they had chemistry very much, but I just wanted, like, this book was just a little bit over 300 pages. It could have been 50 pages longer, and I would have loved more interactions and more scenes with them being actually happy and being actually together. Because if you look at this book, they're never actually together. I wanted that. Like, I wanted them to actually be together in his present, and that never really happened. So like I said, to me then, that this is just not really a romance. It does have an HCA, it just doesn't really focus on it. So 3 stars. I would recommend it because a lot of people do really love this book, and I can definitely see why. It just really wasn't my type of book. I had 3 4-stars, and I talked about all of them in my mid-month wrap-up, and they were That One Night by Emily Rath, which is the prequel novella to Pucking Around. Her Soul for Revenge by Harley LaRue, and Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. That One Night and Yours Truly I also talked about in my Goodreads Choice video. Now for the 5 stars. 3 of them I talked about in my mid-month wrap-up, and they were The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I actually listened to this on audiobook. I never really do that, but with this one I could really focus on it. Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, and In the Likely Event by Rebecca Yarros. Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score, I gave 5 stars. This is the second book in the Knock 'Em Out series by her, and this is the first book I read in that series. And I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I do have to say, normally I don't really say this. Well, I mean, I'm the type of reader who loves to read series in order, but of course for the Goodreads Choice Award I couldn't do that. I do have to say with this book, especially, I do feel like you need to read this series in order, because this one spoils major plot points in the first book. And I felt like, even though I still gave it 5 stars, I did enjoy it. I did feel like it took me a while to really understand the character dynamics, to really understand who was who in this book. So I do feel like it's very beneficial to read Things We Never Got Over before you read Things We Hide from the Light. Anyway, having said all that, this book follows Nash and Lena, and Nash is a police chief in Knock 'Em Out, and Lena is this investigator for an insurance company. So basically, if a very high value item gets stolen, she investigates and tries to find this item. And Lena is friends with Nash's brother. She moves in next door to him, actually, and they really become friends. He has panic attacks, and she has had those in the past, so she really knows how to help him with that. And this is pitched as a friends to enemies to lovers, because at one point he finds out why she's really in town, which he feels is like betrayal to him. And to me, it felt they were never really felt like enemies. It was clear he still cared about her, even though he was mad at her. Yeah, I really loved watching Lena and Nash. I loved that they rescued this dog together and eventually became his dog, and the way they cared for this dog together. It was very adorable. I loved how they were kind of opposites attract, because he was this really buttoned up, like, he's a police chief. He's a rule follower. She really isn't. And she doesn't want to be tied down, whereas he really wants, like, the house, the family, the kids. So those are all things that they have to grapple with. And I really loved watching Knock 'Em Out, Watch the Town, and especially the second couple, or the third couple, was very well set up in this book. So I'm very much looking forward to reading about them. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I would highly, highly recommend it. Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This is the third book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and this series follows these 3 grandsons of this Walt Disney type character. Basically, Dreamland is their version of Disneyland. When their grandfather died, he left them each a task in his will, and once they complete this task, they can get like $25 billion. So Cal's task, he's the third brother. He needs to sell this home, this lakeside home that they have. And he also has to spend one last summer there. What he doesn't know, but he soon finds out when he gets there, is that this house was not only willed to him, but also to Alana, who was his childhood love, and he broke her heart 6 years ago, and he vowed to never return. Now he has to convince her that they need to sell, and she really doesn't want to. She also has a daughter who's just the cutest girl on earth. The thing with Cal is he's an alcoholic, and that is why he broke up with her 6 years ago. And he's still an alcoholic. So this is their second chance romance. This is a billionaire romance, like I said, but it doesn't take, like, this, even though he does spend some money and you do get to see these Dreamland meetings, this primarily takes place in this small town, which I really enjoyed. I really love the second chance romance. I love that this was a second chance when he was still struggling with the same things he was struggling with back then. It's very easy for him to come back after he's been sober for a couple of years, and of course she would take him back. But now they really have to fight for their love. He has to really get better before they actually have a real life second chance romance. I love how he was with her daughter. I just love this couple very much, and I also loved how much they matured. Like I said, even though he still deals with the same things, you know, the fact that they had sex 6 years ago and now it's very different. Like, I just like that, the progression of that. Yeah, I really love this book. I haven't read the other 2 yet, but I'm very much looking forward to reading those as well. This is my first Lauren Asher. It will definitely not be my last. I very much enjoyed myself. Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This is actually the second Ellie Hazelwood that I've read. I haven't read her second book. I did read The Love Hypothesis. This follows Elsie and Jack, and Elsie has to supplement her income because she doesn't make very much at her current job. So she is a professional fake dater, basically. So there's this app where men can request a fake girlfriend to take with or fake date to like certain events. So she has been this fake girlfriend for this guy for a while now, and now she is applying for a different job in her field. She's a theoretical physicist, and who should be the person deciding whether or not she should get this job but his brother. And the thing with these fake girlfriend type things is they can never really tell you what their actual job is. So when he sees her there, he thinks that she's a liar. So he doesn't want to hire her, and he thinks like he doesn't see her in the best light at all. But he's also been pining for her ever since his brother introduced her to the family. And also what is a thing in this book is that he's a experimental physicist, and there's this beef going on with the theoretical physicist and the experimental physicist, and that is primarily because of him, because he wrote this scathing art. Well, technically not a scathing article. He wrote this fake paper where there were a bunch of mistakes, and he sent it in to be published by this major, like very prominent theoretical physicist publisher, I guess. And they did publish it, and eventually that person got fired, the editor of that paper, and that began the discussion of whether or not theoretical physics, like, is that even a valid science, I guess. Yeah, eventually, obviously, they fall in love. It's very, once again, Allie, it's a very giant man and a tiny woman. In fact, he was compared to a refrigerator at one point. And when I read that, I just laughed out loud. Like, Allie, really, you need to stop emphasizing how giant these men are, because it's just, like, it's gonna be a drinking game at one point. Just like drink anytime his size is mentioned. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I haven't reread The Love Hypothesis ever, but right now this feels like it's my favorite out of the two. I just really love Jack. I thought he was such a great guy. I just fell in love with him so much. I loved the way he pined for her and the way he helped her become herself a little bit more, even if that was detrimental for their relationship. I do have to say, just like with the 7-year slip, this was really focused on Elsie. Once again, a single point of view. I would have loved more about Jack. This didn't need to necessarily be a dual point of view story, but I would just love to have more conversations about him and his past and everything that happened with him and what made him write the article and stuff like that. And his years in between that, in between him writing the article and her meeting her. I just would have loved more insight in that, and that could have just easily been solved with a couple conversations where it was focused a little bit on him and not just on her. But yeah, overall I would recommend it. I did enjoy it, and yeah, definitely a favorite of the month. And then my last book, my last 5-star, it was Wildfire by Hannah Grace. I didn't think this was going to make the top 10, and I'm so very glad that it did, because I really, really love this book. This might be, I think this is my favorite I read this month. I really loved it. This is the second book in her Maple Hill series, I think. Basically, you follow Russ and Aurora, and Russ is part of the hockey team. He has a very horrible home life. His father is a gambling addict, and he just asks him for money all the time, and if he doesn't give him money, he just curses him out, basically. And he's very shy. He doesn't think that he's attractive, and he's not very outgoing. And Aurora, she also has daddy issues. Her father is this rich man. He never really asks about her, and he never gives her attention, and the way she gets attention is by getting into trouble all the time. And then they meet at this hockey party, and they have this hot, steamy night together. And then she leaves before he gets back from the bathroom, because first of all, she leaves because she thinks that he is in the bathroom for so long because he wants her to leave, and he was really just hyping himself up to ask her out on a date, and he thinks she left because she's not attracted to him, stuff like that. Then they meet at summer camp where they're both counselors, and one big rule at summer camp is that there's a no fraternization policy. The camp counselors are not supposed to have relations. So that actually, even though they had a one-night stand, it eventually kind of turns into a slow burn, because they really become friends at this camp, and it's clear that they're still very attracted to each other, and they slowly actually get together, because even though she loves breaking rules, he is the opposite. He loves following them, mainly because of his dad and stuff that happened in the past. So he's very reluctant to do anything, even though he really does want to. He really needs his job. He's afraid he's gonna get fired if they do start up a relationship, but slowly but surely he cannot resist. And I just really loved them. I especially loved Russ. I thought Russ was just the sweetest. He was such a good boy. I loved him so much. I loved reading about him. I loved how much he cared. I loved how he was just a good guy. I just wanted all the good things for him. And I really loved Aurora. I thought she was so funny. I also loved that she comes across one way, but really she's something completely different, or someone completely different. I love the way she cares. And especially seeing them interact with the kids was just adorable. And there was these scenes with these dogs that completely loved him, which I would totally get, because I would be the same. Yeah, I really love this book. I do have to say with this one, if you can, I would read the first one first, even though I haven't read that yet. But I do have to say, especially in the beginning, I had such a hard time differentiating between his hockey friends and their girlfriends. Like, I was like, who are you? I don't understand. So she never spent any time introducing them, which I would get, because it's a second book in the series. But this book's saving grace was that the majority took place at this camp, and she did have to introduce those characters. But yeah, if you can, I would recommend reading the first book first. I am very much looking forward to reading the first book in December. But yeah, I would highly recommend this book. So now for my favorites, I actually had 4, which is a lot, but I do have to say, I didn't have any 5-star books in September. So maybe that is playing a part. But yeah, all of them I actually read for the Goodreads Choice video. All of them were Goodreads Choice winners. So the first one is In the Likely Event by Rebecca Yarros. I really love this book. I actually cannot stop thinking about this book. And I found myself comparing this book to a lot of other books I read this month. So yeah, I really love this one. Final Offer. I just was so endeared to these 2 characters and her daughter. I just had such a good time. And this book was very long, and I was afraid that I was not gonna love it, because sometimes I think these romances are too long, but I didn't find this book to be too long at all, because I was flying through this book. Like, any chance I could, I just was picking this book up. So yeah, definitely a favorite. Love Theoretically. I just really love this book. Once again, I find myself thinking about Jack quite a bit. I just really love this book. And last but most certainly not least, Wildfire. This is my favorite book I read this month. I would highly recommend it. I just really loved it. So yeah, very good reading month. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were. Also, I would really love to know what your favorite book was that you read this month. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know by leaving a like if you did. And thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.